Market Watch columnist Brett Ahrens. We've also got Independent Women's Forum senior policy analyst Inez Stepman, and last but not least, the Wall Street Journal editorial board member John Bussey. John, and we begin with you then. His premise is kind of what the president's was a few years ago, telling African-American audiences, what the hell have you got to lose? What do you think?
Right. I mean, from the standpoint of the economy, which has done well, and unemployment, which has done well, in other words, dropping, the president's got a good story to tell. It is a continuation of a recovery that began in 2009 with President Obama, but nonetheless, he hasn't messed up the economy. He has created a $1 trillion budget deficit with those tax cuts that spurred the economy, and that'll be for the next generations to take care of, spending somebody else's money. But traditionally, blacks, African Americans have allied with the Democratic Party because of deliverables from the Democratic Party. Voting Rights Act, Great Society, Lyndon Johnson, number of black candidates that are Democrats. Even now, you see with Deval Patrick thinking of coming in, Kamala Harris. You see an identification that is historical, goes way back. Interests of African-American community in the South, particularly South Carolina. Half of the voters there will be African-American in the Democratic primaries. A tradition that goes back to an alliance between African-Americans and Democrats.
You know, and that's one of the things that Gianna was saying that you think about. His wording is clumsy. After Charlottesville, it was particularly clumsy. He said that he chastised the president for that. But that if he had his choice between someone who spoke all the right words and did the right things, he'd choose the right things. And on some of those so-called deliverables, he has done that, you know, with the improving, you know, minority unemployment levels and all of that, record lows and all that, prison reform bills and all that. What do you think of that, and that whether that should be more of a focus of the president? Republicans, even if they could pick up a couple of more percent of an African-American vote that has routinely gone almost monolithically the other way.
Sure, and we've actually seen that on policy, you can change votes. We saw it in the micro level at the state level in Florida, right? So where Governor DeSantis actually picked up 100,000 additional, right, in terms of what was expected, and in terms of African-American votes for other Democratic and Republican candidates in that year, he picked up 100,000 extra votes, almost certainly because of his support for the school choice programs there. So these were school choice moms, mostly African-American and also Hispanic, picked up 100,000 votes he should not have gotten in comparison to the other races that cycle, and it put him over the top and put him in the governorship. So I do think that there's a really good policy case to be made here on criminal justice reform, on school choice, on the economy, on low African-American unemployment, and there's a case to be made to women as well on those grounds, and I think the president should make it.
What do you think, Brett?
Well, I'm old enough to remember when, Republicans competed for the black vote, and the Democrats were the party of the white South. I think since Nixon's 1968 so-called Southern strategy, I think the Republicans deliberately appealed to white Southerners. I don't want to be simplistic and say, oh, they're all racist or they're just being racist, but I do think there has been either a covert or in some cases overt appeal to some of those wings. And it's difficult to appeal to black votes if you're also trying to appeal to that vote. I mean, look, Trump was asked about, David Duke, and he sort of hummed and hawed and said, I don't know what you're talking about, and the rest of it. And then there was Charlottesville. Anyone can misspeak and anyone can make mistakes, but there does seem to be a pattern which certainly appears to a lot of people like he either is not aggressively anti-racist, or he wants to have it both ways, or whatever. I'm not taking sides. I'm saying
I see what you're saying.
I'm saying that in terms of substance, I think you're absolutely right. I mean, school choices, for example, is a perfect example of a policy that Republicans have embraced that can and should appeal to a lot of families in minority and poorer neighborhoods. But I think in terms of setting a tone and setting a narrative, I think that would require quite a substantial change by Trump and the Republican Party to go after the black vote in a major way.
Yeah, you have to do and say that. And it harkens back to something no less than Mark Cuban was saying on our air when it came to the wealth tax, that this goes beyond just party labels. I want you to listen to this.
I did the math, and her 6% wealth tax would require me to pay more after the first year and a half than I have in cash. And so I sent an email to one of the economists, and I said, look, did you guys take into consideration liquidity when you defined your wealth tax and modeled it out?
That's a good question.
And they said no.
The one thing I love about billionaires, they don't see any other color but green. They like green. They like money, and they like having lots of money, and they don't like even this talk of a 2-cent solution that Elizabeth Warren espouses as something that's going to be affordable to them. I think in the case of Jeff Bezos, it would amount to paying $7 billion more, by the way, each year. It goes into effect. So there's this return response, I guess, John, to that populist pitch. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, great for Mark Cuban, very quickly, to do the calculations on the back of a napkin. It's always great as a politician if you can say to someone, I'm going to give you something that you don't have now, Medicare for all, and someone else is going to pay for it. And that's what's happening in the primaries. The math won't add up politically,
right.
Separate from whether or not it adds up. It won't add up politically because she is going to run into huge headwinds on her taxation.
I wonder if she regrets the degree to which she pounded this Medicare.
I'm not so sure. I mean, it's been pretty popular in the electorate. I'm going to go back to something that Brent said. I think that on this issue of appealing to the electorate, not just through taxing the wealthy, but on a race issue to seek to get more African American votes, the problem for the president is that some of it has been overt. In other words, the anti-Muslim rhetoric.
Yeah.
Another minority group sees that and says, Muslims today, me tomorrow, right? The comment to the squad in Congress, go back to the countries that you came from, okay? African American.
In other words, that keeps his base but doesn't expand it.
I don't know if I agree with that, because Mitt Romney didn't do any better.
Let's remember, David Duke was a former head of the Ku Klux Klan.
This is not ambiguous stuff.
Talk about an easy target to take down.
But Inez just touched on something interesting. Mitt Romney, for all of his conventional and rather austere approach, didn't exactly win over a lot of people.
Look, I'm not going to defend the president's remarks after Charlottesville, which I also criticized and thought were atrocious. But generally, I think that we focus way too much on this stuff. I don't think that, because there wasn't a substantial move in the African-American vote. In fact, if anything, Trump did better than Mitt Romney. And Mitt Romney had that, very milquetoast message, please don't offend anyone, other than that 53% remark. He tried very, very hard to run a conventional campaign. I don't think that pandering really helps, and I recognize that you're not saying that. There's a distinction between pandering and being offensive, and I certainly think that Trump could dial back his offensiveness, but I don't think that's the main issue here. I think at the end of the day, we're talking about a long-term historical trend, which you noted. I disagree with your assessment about the Southern strategy. This was the result of a long shift in African-American voters from the 1930s and 40s during the New Deal, when the Democratic Party was overtly racist. Forget about what Trump's saying, right? When FDR
saying that whatever minorities you win over, you're still losing women, you're still losing suburban educated men and women, and that's offsetting it, or what?
I think Trump's biggest problem with the electorate is with college-educated women in the suburbs. I think that even though
and that's
we've seen that in the last two elections,
right?
Yeah, right. But I don't know what the answer is in terms of putting forward. And I think that part of it has to be really elevating those policies like school choice, like criminal justice reform. I think that that's what the Republican Party should do. But I don't know that the answer is to dial back the tone, because that hasn't worked. It didn't work for Mitt Romney.
Well.